one of the finest lawyers in New York, the former GOP chairman of Brooklyn, Craig Eaton. Which federal judge, Craig, which one is better?
Morning from Aruba. I miss you guys. Waiting for the sun to come out here. It's interesting, John, you talk about that because you have a federal judge in New York and you have a federal judge in New Jersey. And I don't quite understand why the federal judge in New Jersey didn't impose a stay on the start of congestion pricing if he had some concerns and some issues about the governor's rollout and the terms and the conditions relating to it. But I guess it'll have to go up to appeal, and they'll have to figure out at that point, what the final decision will be. But congestion
but is the
MTA is a money grab.
Is the MTA just going to go forward and just do it?
I think unless there's a stay in effect, unless some judge imposes a stay from the commencement of congestion pricing, they're all geared up to do it on January 5th. Everybody's going to start getting charged on their Easy Pass as of January 5th. I mean, it's disgraceful. It's just, in my opinion, John, it's nothing more than a money grab.
All right, so Craig Eaton, we know there's no problem with Lee Zeldin, former congressman, being given a green light by the United States Senate, a confirmation to become EPA chief. Once he's fully in charge, can he negate that since Jersey seemed to open the door to suggest the environmental impact study, at least on the Jersey side, was not sufficient?
Curtis, that's a very interesting question. I mean, the federal government will have certain rights to enforce or actually to institute laws and rules and regulations relating to situations like congestion pricing. So if they put a federal law together, I think that's something that everyone and the governor here in New York would have to look at and determine whether or not she has any control over what she's trying to do here.
So can President Trump, through an executive order, because he's going to issue a slew of them by January 21st, a day after he is sworn in at 2 o'clock on January 20th in Washington, D.C., can he negate it by executive order?
I'm not really certain about that, but I think that he can. That's what we were discussing with Judge Weinberg several weeks ago. That if they put in if the president puts in an executive order, that would have an impact on Governor Hochul's congestion pricing plan.
Now, I don't understand, Craig, and maybe you can explain it a little bit. Governor Hochul and Governor Newsom from California are declaring war when we're going to go against the president of the United States. We're going to do whatever the heck we want to do. Can they do it?
You know what? I think it's a lot of talk. I think part of the concern I have is if I were President Trump, I wouldn't have been so vociferous about what I was going to do when I get in office after January 20th. I think what he did was he told everyone what I'm going to do, and he left the states with, a month and a half to try and go in and stop what he wanted to do. So all these governors are trying to put together laws and different rules and regulations to try and cut back on what the president can do. I think it's much ado about nothing. I think a lot of the things that these governors are going to try and do at a statewide level are going to get thrown out with the stroke of a pen by the president when he comes in and he institutes some federal rules and laws and regulations. So I don't think it's going to hold up.
Now, the whole premise of congestion pricing, going back to Bloomberg, who tried to initiate it in 2013, thank God Sheldon Silver went thumbs down, to Andrew Cuomo, who tried to reinstitute it in 2019, although now he's saying, I believe in congestion pricing, but it's not the right time, not the right place to be doing it now, is that the whole idea is to force you out of your car to get into the subway. It couldn't have come at a more inopportune time for the advocates for mass transit because nobody wants to take the subway. It is so crime-ridden. How are you going to get people to leave their vehicles, even if you're imposing this such a heavy tax on them, $9 driving south to 60th Street, when they're basically saying to themselves, do I pay the tax Do I just leave New York or the surrounding areas and go down to Florida or Georgia? Or do I just, take a risk and take the subway where people are getting ripped off and robbed and set on fire every day?
You know, Curtis, I don't take the subway anymore. I don't feel safe in the subway. And from a kid who grew up in Sheepshead Bay and at 14 was getting on the subway every day to go to high school for 4 years at Xavier High School, I didn't feel safe then. But, it's funny because I started Xavier in 1978 and you started the Guardian Angels in 79. And I fondly remember that I would sit there as a young 14-year-old kid on a subway, sometimes fearful. You see people on the train that you're a little leery of. But when I saw a Guardian Angel walking through the train, I felt safe. I felt that nothing's going to happen to me on that subway that day. But congestion pricing, it's just a fallacy. It's not – the whole idea is –
It's a money grab. That's all. You're right.
It's a money grab because you know what? I'm still going to drive into Manhattan to the radio show. I'm not going to get on the subway. And I would venture to guess that 90% of the people that drive into Manhattan are still going to drive into Manhattan. So it's not going to change congestion.
So it's an attack on the poor.
It's an attack on the poor and the middle class. And you know what? The subways, like John talks about all the time, people are not going to go onto the subway until they can feel safe. They're not going to let their children, they're not going to let their wives or husbands go on the train in that subway tunnel until they feel they're safe. And right now they are not safe. I mean, think about it. People are getting burned on subway trains. We've never seen that before.
Never.
I mean, what's going on here? Homeless people.
They're not putting the criminals in jail. They're not putting in the White House. President Biden allowed all the criminals, all the drug addicts, all the murderers to come in through our borders. I mean, somebody has to be held accountable. Who pressed the button and allowed these people to come in?
The White House.
It had to be the White House, or it had to be somebody within the inner circle of the president that talks for the president.
Think about all the immigrants that we have here, the immigrants that have had to deal with the immigration laws and the rules and regulations to come to this great country. Think about the problems that a lot of these people have getting deported back. And what did we do? Biden opened up the border and said, everybody come in. Doesn't matter if you're a terrorist. Doesn't matter if you bring in fentanyl. Doesn't matter if you're a drug dealer or a part of a gang. Doesn't matter if you have a disease. We're not going to check you. We're not going to vet you. We're not going to ask you for tests. We're not going to do background checks. We just opened the border. I mean, how dangerous is that for us as American citizens?
Well, now, legal question, Craig. Put on your legal hat. Joe Biden let some of them in through the portal of them declaring they're asylum seekers and then them being paroled into the United States. It's a form of parole where they're given a slip and they're told 5 years from now you ought to report to the federal court on your immigration status, make your argument. You better make a sufficient argument or you'll be deported back to your country of origin. He has given so many commutations and so many pardons. Could he give a blanket pardon to everybody who came in as an asylum seeker and was given a ticket to show up in court and was told you're paroled into the United States?
You know what? I don't have a legal answer to that question, but I doubt that he could impose a blanket pardon. I mean, some people were saying that before he leaves, he wants to do a blanket pardon for anybody that was in his administration that might be caught up in a federal investigation once he leaves. I think he would have to identify who you're pardoning and why you're pardoning them. But look what he did. He didn't pardon, but he took away the death sentence of 37 hardened murderers around the country. 37 people who murdered innocent victims. The president last week said, okay, you could spend the rest of your life in prison, but you're not going to face the death penalty. Now, did he talk to the victims' families? Did he talk to the prosecutors who prosecuted those cases to find out what the true facts and circumstances were?
That's why I don't think so.
No, I'm sure he didn't.
I think the inner circle that talks for the president around him. We have to find out which ones of those people made the stupid that turned our country in bizarro world.
John, you know what frustrates me, Curtis and John, is that the president lost. He's on his way out. You know, the biggest thing he should do is do no harm. Do no harm as you're walking out the door. Leave with a good legacy. Don't leave with people second guessing all the decisions you've made in your last 30 days in office. And it's disgraceful, some of the things that he's doing and some of the things that he says he's going to do before he leaves. I mean, we had 4 years of total dysfunction in Washington. We had the weaponization of the DOJ. We had the weaponization of the U.S. Attorney's Office, the weaponization of the prosecutors and the FBI and the judicial system. I mean, look what happened here in New York with the case against Donald Trump. And the judge is still going to hold out and say, we'll sentence you after your 4 years are up as president. I mean, it's disgraceful what's going on. We need to come back to law and order. We need the rule of order. We need to start to follow the Constitution.
All right, well, look at what Joe Biden said. Joe Biden said that his Attorney General Garland went easy on Donald Trump and went hard on his son, and that the Department of Justice was weaponized against Hunter Biden, the biggest degenerate in the history of presidential families.
I think when the family has approached, I'm not going to say, but the word treason, I think, is approachable.
And one last thing, Craig, think about this, because we discussed a blanket pardon for those illegal aliens who claim they were asylum seekers, went through the portal where they were told by the Biden administration, get your app, you're an asylum seeker, we give you a ticket, you're on parole in the United States until you have your hearing 5 years from now. When Jimmy Carter came into office 2 years afterwards, 2 days after he was sworn in, he gave a blanket pardon to all the draft evaders. Anybody who had avoided the Vietnam draft was immediately made whole again. I think this can be done.
You know, I don't have an answer to that. I haven't researched it. I don't have an answer to that.
Well, we better find out quick, because if he's able to do it, he'll do it. He'll do it.
Well, you know, it's funny talking about the Biden family. For years, Joe Biden has been saying that he never met Hunter's business associates. And suddenly now the photos emerge of him and his son in meetings with Hunter's business associates. I mean, photos don't lie. So, you know, how does he avoid that? How does he avoid the criticism and the destruction of his legacy with that? Because you know that Hunter Biden traded on the Biden family name when Joe Biden was vice president. And to me, that's almost treason. I mean, that's almost actionable. It should be actionable.
Well, you know, he'll pardon, he not only pardon his son, he'll pardon himself, he'll pardon Jill, he'll pardon his brothers. He's likely to issue the biggest mass pardons and commutations in the history of the president. And it suggests that maybe we need to rein in these powers. They're getting a little ridiculous. Pre-pardons now? What the hell is a pre-pardon? You haven't even gone on trial, and I'm basically making you whole by saying you're innocent, although you haven't even been proved innocent or guilty by a jury of your peers.
It is kind of a stretch, Curtis. It's kind of a stretch that a president can try and pardon unnamed people for unnamed crimes who have not been prosecuted yet or indicted yet. But
no, to me, Craig, this is crazy. This is way beyond, I think, what our founding fathers thought that a presidential power should be. But anyway, Craig Eaton, former GOP chair, Kings County, one of the top lawyers, jurists here in New York City, and regular contributor to the 5 o'clock roundtable discussion of John Katzimatidis and Rita Cosme. Enjoy Aruba.
Well, bring some sunshine back, please.
John, I just got to tell you, John, I'm on the beach here since last Friday, and I can't tell you how many people say, I hear you on WABC, give John and Curtis and the judge and Rita our best. A guy, Steve Dennis, from Rockland County, says he listens every single day to you. And I have my daughter and my son-in-law and my daughter-in-law listening in today as well. But keep up the great work, John. I always say you are a common sense guy. You have changed the world with what you have done on the radio and what you've done philanthropically with you and your beautiful wife, Margot, and your children. God bless you and your family, and happy and healthy and prosperous New Year to all of our WABC listeners.